In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Hello and welcome everybody to Be the Wellness Podcast. Adam and Vanessa Lambert podcasting.
Yes, we're back at it.
Indeed.
Yes.
And
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, knocking the rust off.
Yeah. The rust or the dust?
Rust.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is it when you just when you oil the rust off?
No, I mean this is like a saying.
Grind it off. It's a saying?
Totally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Over here sanding buffing the rust off of this thing so I can use it.
Exactly. No.
I mean, I get you could knock the dust off as well, but I'm pretty sure rust is the word.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we're knocking the rust off,
Yeah.
and it's beautiful outside.
Yes, all the standard podcast intro things to cover.
I have some
weather.
good news.
What is it?
We're over 60 reviews on the podcast.
Oh, that's legit.
It's super exciting. Well, 60, so I think we're 61 or 62 in the U.S. And then obviously there's some in other countries, but usually I only see the U.S. because you have to sort differently. But thank you to people out there who've left reviews.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We really appreciate
it. Adds up.
Yes.
And who knew that you had to be in a specific country?
Well, you don't have to be in a specific country.
But you get categorized. Yes, you're going to need to fly to Uzbekistan.
Exactly.
We don't have very many reviews from the Uzbeks.
We don't.
So if somebody could get over there and sort that out.
I think they call them Uzbekis.
Really?
No,
Oh.
I don't know.
Yes. I don't know. Okay.
So if you haven't left us a review,
there's still time.
There's still time.
And
you can even do it in your country that you're in right now.
Yes, without going anywhere else.
Yes, which is pretty cool.
But for those of you who do travel to other countries, it would be interesting to know if you could bounce over there and then log in on a local IP and leave a review.
Oh.
Right?
Hack the system.
It's possible that you, like super users, could be multi-country reviewers.
It's
which
true.
Would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're giving awards for reviews left in the most countries.
It's true.
So we have a really special guest today that I'm excited to have because, we try to obviously bring on diverse guests and really, look at different ways to sort of just clue people into different ways of thinking or being or different modalities for healing and health and well-being and all of that good stuff. Mm-hmm. And she has a very special specificity to
specialty.
She's especially special to sort of her contribution to this arena. And her name is Amaris, and she has a beautiful Instagram, which is of course how I found her, called Amaris Land. And she literally posts about different types of crystals and rocks and the different sort of healing energy and kind of I guess just like really the energy and sort of just the usages of crystals and rocks and all of that good stuff in people's lives. And what I like about her is that she has just such an authentic way of being with all this stuff. So, she's really just sharing her own journey, her own story, how she's found healing through these different crystals and energies. And it's just like a really beautiful way to share her own personal journey with these amazing, beautiful photos and videos and all of the things that she shares on her Instagram page, which is like in itself just beautiful to look at.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And as you guys will hear, her thing clearly resonates with a lot of people, which is cool.
Yeah, and I think, for her, it's about just recognizing that a lot of people are suffering. They're suffering in different ways. And if this can be something that can help you through your suffering, help you find, a little bit of light, a little bit of beauty, and just someone who has kind of gone through it before, it can be so supportive to people in their time of need. And so it's just, to me, something so simple as, a gem or a rock or a crystal can really bring you back into the present moment and really kind of get you back into what's important for you. And it's cool.
Yeah. And they're just kind of fascinating. Like this is because it's a little weird to talk about the woo-woo nature of rocks and crystals and all this stuff. But like when you actually have them in your hand, you're like, there's something to it.
Yes.
You know, you're like, oh, these are interesting.
Yes.
You know, like the
there's
whole,
a vibration.
Yeah, something's up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know like we don't really have the right tools to measure these things or whatever. So at this point, you just kind of have to go on what you feel and how you feel and what the connection that you individually have. But I think it's something that is just worth, like, if you're interested at all, this is a way to just kind of pique your interest and dive a little deeper into this practice.
Right.
Of rocks.
Yeah, just having rocks. And at the end of
Yeah.
the day, like worst case scenario, you've got some cool stuff in your house.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, pretty much someday I want to have crystal painted walls.
Crystal coated
walls.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe I just want to live in an amethyst cave. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You probably want that on the inside of your house, though. Because there's a lot of negatives that come with caves in general.
Yeah, it's
right?
true.
So it's like the cave negatives probably outweigh the amethyst
Good sleep
enclosure.
Though, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay,
don't
so
know
we're going. We're taking this way off the
Man, we
rails.
should have
now.
asked these questions.
We should have.
Yeah.
But
Next time,
definitely
round two.
check out her Instagram. I mean, obviously she's making an impression. She has over 230,000 followers. So like the resonance of what she's talking about and what she's sharing is profound.
Yeah.
And, you know, rocks kind of happen to be the medium in which she's speaking through, but there's just something really special about her and her message. And we just instantly adored her. She came, you know, to Venice and did the podcast live. So you'll get that sense of just really getting to know her and on an intimate sense. And yeah, we just really, really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah. And without further ado, here's Amaris. And we're live. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me, you guys.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks for driving all the way up here.
Yeah.
We think it's impressive when people come from across town, and you came all the way from San Diego. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I love this area, and I haven't been to LA in a really long time. So I was like, you know what? It's a beautiful day.
It
I want to go
is.
connect with them. So
Yeah, no, we
Yeah.
appreciate it. So it's really cool because I don't know how I came across you on Instagram, and our listeners are really used to this story with me at this point where I find someone interesting on Instagram or
Right.
somewhere in social media and I seek them out because I'm like, what they're doing is cool. And the thing that I like to really kind of distill in the podcast is that, you know, there's like the world is wide open for people. Like you can do whatever it is that your heart desires.
Absolutely.
And you are like a perfect example of this. And, you know, your title on Instagram is Gem Sorceress, right?
Yeah, it is. It is.
And I love this because you have decided, you've declared that you are this thing and you've literally created and embodied this thing that you want to be in the world. And so I really want to talk about this kind of backstory. Like, first of all, how did you get into crystals and gemstones and this kind of work? But also, what was the moment where you were like, oh, this is how I want to define myself in the world?
Okay, so I've always been into crystals and gemstones since I was about 2 years old. And so my family kind of just helped me go with the passion. They knew I was really interested in the earth from a very young age. So they would take me to mines and we'd go crystal hunting and, you know, I'd buy little gems at the little shops and stuff. And it continued on throughout my life. And then I ended up going to UC Berkeley for school. I was studying political science there, and when I was there, I kind of lost that whole connection with my crystals and all of that. And it's funny because before that, I never really looked at crystals in a spiritual way or a healing way. It was just something that I felt so naturally drawn to. So there was something special there. And I'm a Taurus, so the earth is just like me, you know?
Yeah.
So when I was there, I ended up getting into a relationship that was pretty serious. It was my first love. And it ended up being kind of a toxic relationship that basically I allowed myself, the way I look at it now is I kind of allowed myself to lose my power in that relationship. So it was really dark in that time of my life. And for a long time, I had no confidence in myself. And I got sick while I was there and had to leave a little bit early, take some time off. And so it took me a couple years of just like self-discovery and looking into the healing aspects of crystals and whatnot. And I started to discover who I was again, slowly but surely. And so I created this character. So my actual name is Christina, and Amaris is kind of like my higher self, because when I was so lost, I was like, who would I be? Who am I when I'm being my most authentic and confident self? And it was Amaris, you know, the person who believes in herself and spreads love all around the world and has the biggest heart, you know, because that's who I am on a deeper level. I just was so jaded, you know. And so it kind of grew from there, and I have this like childlike wonder in me. So I created Amaris Land, which is like the beautiful crystal wonderland where you can bring anything to fruition. And by identifying with that story, I kind of started becoming that person in real life again. And so that's how I became the Gem Sorceress. And now I'm able to tap into my own power to create the vision that I want for the world. So yeah, it's kind of a long backstory and it's kind of deep, but that's where it all came from.
Yeah, that's, well, I think it's incredibly interesting because like it's something that you talk about all the time, right? And if you see, you know, everywhere in the self-help world and all of these things, it's all about creating this identity and seeing yourself as this person and doing all of this. And it's actually surprising to me that there's not more of a push to do exactly what you did, which is like fundamentally rename yourself and create a new place for yourself to live.
Exactly.
Like how much easier is it to make that all real? You know what I mean? If you're like, nope, guess
Build the
what?
house.
Sorry, I'm this person, you know?
Yeah.
And so you're the third person that I have met who is sort of has done that, you know? And like, this makes a lot more sense because I think you're articulating it really well.
Yeah.
But like some other people, they straight up change their name, and then like you go to talk to them, and they're like, "No, that's not my name anymore. It's this now." And you're like, But without the backstory, it's a little confusing. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
And Amaris just kind of came to me. You know, it's funny because I get a lot of messages from people like, "Oh, do you know your name means like love and this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's why I chose it." You know, it's like I've seen the darkness, and I want to let people know that you don't have to stay there. You know, because I made it out, and you know, throughout your life, you experience these things that develop you, and we consider them, maybe label them bad, but they're not always bad, you know. We become our higher selves through those experiences.
Right. Like it's a pressure cooker almost. Like it forces us into the next expression of ourselves. And it's kind of like people, you know, we're in the human experience. So to expect that there's not going to be that yin and yang, that dark shadow and that light, like, I mean, I think it's just cooked in the cake here, like, or baked in the cake, right? And so, well, I want to get back to when you started to think about or discover the healing nature of crystals, because, you know, I think that there's a whole lot of kind of like mysticism or hippiness around this. And maybe there's like, people might tend to just kind of dismiss it or just, you know, just kind of not really even take into account what that really means. So I'd really love to know like your point of view on like, what does that look like? What when you talk about the healing properties of things, what are we actually talking about?
So it's funny because there's books that explain like, oh, this crystal specifically heals this and that. And while I like that, it's a good guide for people when they're just starting to kind of get an idea of, you know, what people have thought for a really long time each crystal like helps you with.
Right.
I'm a huge proponent in feeling it out for yourself though. And so it's kind of like when you start out to try and understand the healing properties, it is good to have that little basis. But I like to encourage people to feel a crystal and be like, why do I feel this? Like, why do I feel this connection with it? And it kind of gets you starting to think about your like life, what's going on, and how it can be a tool to help you. Because I don't think that like when you sit and you hold a crystal and you do nothing, that it's gonna do anything. I don't think you know, you can't sit on your couch and just be like, okay, I'm holding this crystal, what's going to happen to me? You know, that's not how it works. So I think if you're willing to mentally and emotionally, physically, spiritually, change your life and shift your perspective to reach the intention that you want, crystals are really good tools for that because they'll reflect like the energy that you're putting. So it's kind of like when you talk about, putting an intention in a crystal or programming it. It's like you meditate with it. You can hold it in your heart, your stomach, you know, and whatever intention you have, you can speak it out loud and manifest it, and the crystal will mirror like your own energy. And so Yeah, I mean,
That's cool. It's kind of like a little energy heater,
Right.
right? Like
Exactly,
it'll
yeah.
just kind of like hold the energy or like the pattern.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when you think about it, like these stones, these crystals, I mean, some of them are hundreds, thousands, hundred thousands, millions of
yeah.
years old. That they've literally been here as long as time, and I think it's always interesting that people would assume that there's no power in them,
Right,
or like
right.
like it just seems almost silly to think that there wouldn't just be a lot of inherent intelligence in that particular thing, because it's literally been evolving and adapting through however long. Hopefully, oftentimes like thousands, hundred thousands of years. So you're just like, well, it just kind of makes sense, right, Adam? I like to throw it to you because he's a little
'Cause it
bit more
doesn't
of the
make sense.
skeptic.
Yeah.
So like this is where I think like I'd like to hear the skeptic's point of view.
So what I'm hearing, and what I'm hearing you say, I think is a really interesting piece of this, because it's something that you don't hear often, and that it's almost like the stone or the gem or whatever the object is a focal point for your subconscious to like generate whatever it is
Right.
that you're working on, right? Yeah. And so and that I think is something that's like, well, for one, I mean, we've shown that works. Like there's all sorts of studies across the board, in various realms. I can't think of one where somebody like set their intention to a rock specifically, but it's like that concept is there. Like we know that there's, if you have this focal point, you can create this. I mean, that fundamentally all meditation does that. I mean, that's what a mantra is, right? So when we're talking about like a tangible physical mantra, and that's a whole different way of talking about this,
Yeah.
And so which I think is pretty cool. To your point about the intelligence of rocks, I mean, again, I think it comes down to like how you talk about it, because it's really easy. You're like, no, define intelligence. How do you do that?
Right.
And so when you talk about things like this in that manner, it's really easy to dismiss what's going on.
Right.
But if you talk about it, in a manner where you're saying, okay, look, this is a tool, it's a focal point, it's a concept, even if it's at the most fundamental level. I'm not saying this is how it works, but even if all it is a mechanism for the placebo effect of feeling better about what goes on, it doesn't matter if it works.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if you're
Yeah.
able to grab hold of this and have it, guide you through whatever you've got going on, it's like, my opinion on how all this stuff works is sort of irrelevant. It's like it doesn't really matter. But I think just like back to the
But how do you think it works?
Question. Well, I think it's really hard to say how it works. So and this is the thing. So at some point in my life, I would have just been like, like this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
However, if you start to dig a little bit deeper and you look at how, like what you're describing and how this is working and how the subconscious works and how subliminally you're generating your life. I mean, even if it's not like the generation of your, let's see, you get caught up in the language of all of this stuff because everything's so like tied into it. But even like not from like the secret perspective where you just really, really want the Ferrari and you're trying to generate a Ferrari. The reality is you are generating your reality.
Yeah.
Like your interpretation of everything taking place in this world is your interpretation alone, and you can't know anybody else's. And so the fact that exists, it just makes it really hard to question anybody else's reality about how things. You're like, no, this stone has kept me safe and makes me feel blah, blah, blah. And it's the only way that I'm going to go, do whatever in my life. And you're like, cool. I mean, I don't know, like, who am I to say that that's not a reality for you? And from my perspective, there is no doubt that there's spaces that feel centering. There's spaces that feel grounding. There's spaces that feel comfortable, and there's places that make you genuinely uncomfortable. And they can literally be just rocks. I mean, we were just talking about being in Joshua Tree this last weekend, and we were looking for property, and So we're seeing all of these different places, and we come across one property, and it's like, this is it.
Yes.
There's something about that
Right.
space.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so people, you call it an energy vortex, you call it a whatever, you know, it's like Sedona, Arizona. Everybody's like, oh man, the energy vortex there is crazy. And you're like, right. It's also a super cool place to hang out. But why? Why are you attracted to it? Like what triggers that in your head to say, there's no energy vortex, I just like it here? You're like,
Yeah.
well, what's the difference? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why do you like it? What's going on? So, and that's a long sort of convoluted answer to what you're saying. But I guess like what it comes down to is there's definitely something for there. And I think anybody can identify with this. There's something about places that make you feel a certain way. And it could very well be the rocks. You know what I mean? It's like, it's entirely possible, you know? So don't dismiss it, you know, don't. And that would be my, you know, advice to the listeners is like, even if the language around it sounds woo woo and you're skeptical of what it is that we're talking about, try to see past the language and understand conceptually what we're talking about, because I think that's where, you know, the substance is.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I totally get where you're coming from. You know, I've heard all different types of perspectives, and I have, you know, elements of every perspective that I like to entertain and think about, you know. Everything on earth is made of energy. We are everything around you. We all absorb it. It's like you can feel it when you're around somebody who has a low vibration, and you can feel it impact yourself. And that's why it's so important that we talk about having friends around us that are positive and encouraging and loving. Otherwise, the people you surround yourself are going to bring you down.
Yeah.
So, and actually speaking to the topic of the intelligence of crystals, they actually do store knowledge, and they're present in a lot of our electronics. So it's like cell phones, computers, they use quartz crystals because of that capability. So there is something there to what you're saying. I don't, you know a whole lot about like the science behind like how there's crystals and phones. I'm doing more research on that presently, but
cool.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. I didn't think about that with the cell phones. It's true. Like, so.
Well, a quartz watch, right? It's a quartz. The most accurate clock in the world is a quartz watch. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I don't know this is true, but for some reason I have this, I don't know, some story stored in my mind somewhere about different places that actually have like certain kinds of crystals under the ground that, you know, are actually like this area has a ton of rose quartz underneath. I mean, and you even think about rock quarries or places where they get granite or whatever. Right. So I'm just curious, like, have you ever gone and visited a place that you know is like, oh, it has this kind of rock or this kind of crystal, like an area that's specific for that?
Yeah, I have actually. For example, Colorado, it has a lot of jaspers in certain areas and agates. And so I went and I was doing some rock hounding there and picked up a bunch of really cool pieces. And they're just, especially after a rain, they'll kind of wash out and you'll just see them on the ground and you can pick them up. And
wow.
Yeah, so there's, you know, different places have different types of crystals and minerals. But for example, like Arkansas is one of the largest quartz areas in the world, along with Brazil. And so you'll find, you know, quartz, amethyst, rose quartz, smoky quartz. Those are all quartz. They just have different minerals throughout them that change the colors.
Oh, cool.
Of them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. So you go to the gem show, right?
I do. In Tucson?
In Tucson. Yeah.
do.
So
It's
I was
incredible.
like drooling over your Instagram feed at that time. And our friend actually was, you know, we were just talking about wanting to go because I can only imagine going to a show that's just chock full of rocks and crystals.
It's incredible.
I bet.
Oh, it's amazing. It's such a beautiful experience, and you see so many different ginormous specimens that you're just like, this is larger than life, you know? And even there, it's like, those are not the biggest pieces that exist, and a lot of them are still under the ground. So it's cool, and it also can be a really overwhelming experience because, you know, you talk about the energy and how many crystals are there, how big it is, and I oftentimes, you know, you have to do a lot of grounding and shielding because it's kind of just like boom, 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 like hitting you like crazy, and it's kind of exhausting.
And then I bet, I mean, it's got to be an interesting crowd too, like that of people who go seek that out.
Oh yeah, you find all sorts of different kinds of people, but what's really really cool is most of the time everyone there is in a really good mood, and they're all just really
Pretty
happy
stoked.
to see these cool pieces of the earth, you know? So it's cool. Yeah. And it's cool to be around that many people who are interested in the same thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely.
So
I could see that because like, I don't know. I just feel like anytime I've ever gone into a gem shop or just, you know, been around, even just like on the side of the road, sometimes they have like little stands or whatever, and you stop and it's just always like, people just seem really stoked on what they're doing. And to show you their stones, they're like,
Just,
no,
like,
check
geek
out this
out on
one.
it.
Yeah, exactly. It is. And I'm like, that's so
Yeah.
cute. Like, you're like, look at my rocks. They're so pretty.
yeah. And you know, that's another, you know, aspect of the healing of the crystals is that being a part of that community is really cool too, because it's like you're connecting with people who have the same interests and are seeking the same thing. You know, it's like, I want to heal. I want to become a better person. I want to be more mindful. I want to meditate. And so you start to connect with these people who together you raise your own vibration and your own frequencies.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's nice. Like the crystal community on Instagram is so beautiful.
Yes.
And everyone's so supportive of each other.
Right.
And it makes you feel not so alone in the world, you know?
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that in and of itself is just incredible. And that, I mean, it's something that we talk a lot about in our world is creating these communities because, and I think I'm certainly not the only one that has said this. I'm probably just going to hack it because it's probably a real quote, but something about, you know, if we're as connected as we are and how many of us as there are on this planet, and nobody's alone physically, but
Right.
we're the loneliest that we've been,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because there's this lack of actual community and things that we can
Human
sort of
connection.
yeah, exactly, come together with, you know. So I think anything that you can grab hold of that's going to create that community. And it's, I wonder, have you ever heard of Dunbar's number? The idea, so he was an anthropologist. I think he was an anthropologist. But anyway, he had this idea that based on just kind of, you know, how humans have evolved, that in the tribal times, like pre-agriculture, like it seemed to be about 150 people was about as big as a community could get before like the relationships started to get weird.
Okay.
So the idea is that from an evolutionary perspective, we are only wired up to have about 150 contacts where we're like, okay, we know these people, there's 150 of them, and we can care about everybody here and have some level of interaction with them. Obviously, some closer as you get more nuclear. But once you get past 150, relationships start to get like less meaningful, and it's harder for us to wrap our heads around it. So as the group continues to grow, it's more and more cognitive dissonance, and you become closer with fewer and fewer people because it's like it's overwhelming, right? To have all of this. So I think when you can create these communities, and especially like the more specific the community gets, the smaller it gets, and the more into that world, you know, into that sort of natural piece you get, and you're like, no, these are my 150
my
people.
yeah.
You know, and so then all of a sudden you can sort of block out the rest of it because you've carved out this niche for yourself, you know. So I think like generally the more of those little tribes you can create, the better. You know?
Right. Oh, I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, and it's just so interesting because the gem community, like you said it's so beautiful, and I mean it literally is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like if you go to your Instagram or you know any of the gem people, like their feeds are full of these beautiful, gorgeous rainbows and crystals, and you know prisms off the wall from crystals, and it's just like. It even just looking at the feed, you feel like an uptick of energy.
yeah, it's really powerful because even just like the vibrant colors, they're all natural, and it's we as humans, we're so drawn to color, and color is healing. You know, there is such a thing as color therapy, and I do, you know, a lot of these stones are related to different chakras, and so you can meditate on a lapis lazuli, which is really blue, and you know, a lot of people use that for throat chakra balancing, or sometimes even third eye and like crown,
Right.
because it is like a very spiritual stone. So yeah, even just the fact that you have all these different shapes and colors is so pleasurable to see as a human, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
No, it's such a great way to put it. It really is. It's like we were enjoying some essential oils before we got started, and it's like all of our senses, you know, as humans, we are our senses, right?
Exactly.
So to get to delight in your senses, to see color, to smell wonderful things, I mean, it turns up our human experience, so to speak. So like it totally makes sense. So I want to get back to the chakras. And, I do a lot of guided meditation. We actually talk about balancing chakras in one of our meditation programs. And, I'm definitely tuned into the idea of chakra balancing and sort of opening the flow of energy. So I'm just curious what your practices are personally. Do you kind of scan your body, look at your chakras, then choose a crystal? Like, what's your process to work with the chakras and the crystals together?
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I do. When I feel any type of dissonance in my life, I like to go inwards and kind of discover where that feeling is coming from. And I'm an empath, so I can deeply and physically feel like something is wrong and something is off. And so I can relate it to a chakra. And, for example, my root chakra is probably my least in balance. I don't really know fully what's causing it, but I am a very upper chakra heavy person and like heart chakra. Got it. So I have to spend a lot of time, with smoky quartz and like sitting on the earth and, grounded. And exactly. And, you can have crystals laying on your chakras, like small ones, and you can lay and meditate and you can speak affirmations. You can imagine the colors of the chakras and direct energy through the crystals into you using your thoughts, things like that. There's a lot of different methods, but
yeah, cool. Yeah. No, that's awesome. I think that I've always so I did Reiki. I learned like Reiki as a young girl, and that was kind of my first sort of impetus into energy and healing and that kind of thing. Awesome. And I remember part of it is taking the pendulum, the crystal pendulum, to see what's going on with the chakra energy. Right. And so for listeners out there, one of the practices that you do is you actually take the crystal pendulum and you place it over the chakra of the person, and you see which direction the crystal swings. Yeah. And so if the chakra is swinging open or if it's going side to side, and you can kind of tell energetically if that chakra is working optimally or if it needs a little love. Yeah. And so I've always found that, that first moment where I was like, wow, this crystal is actually, kind of dictating what's going on. And, this is getting into like kind of hippie stuff, but I never want to leave listeners behind who aren't as hippie as maybe I am or maybe Amaris is. Yeah. But I do because I want to bridge the gap here because, but the crazy thing is, you'll do this and then you'll ask the person like, hey, I see this or I feel this here. What's going on? Are you having a hard time communicating? Or, I feel a little heartbreak and 99% of the time they'll be like, yeah, I had a fight with my boyfriend or just whatever. Right. And you're just like, okay, there's something there. Like, there's something to be said for this natural intelligence of what's going on energetically with people. Yeah.
I mean, even our hearts just communicate on a very, very like wide, broad spectrum, actually by magnetic waves. Right. And so it's interesting to think how like our actual experiences, like how we feel, can be felt very far and wide, so, and if you are intuitive and you can tap into people's energies very easily like that, then you can be like, oh, you probably have gone through a heartbreak or you're depressed or, things like that. And I don't know, it's helpful. Yeah. It's really helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, okay.
You guys both look at me. I'm like, okay, I can talk about that. I'm with it. Well, so and this is it. Yeah. So the thing about like the Reiki healing and all of this stuff, and again, I think most of the pushback against this sort of stuff comes from it not being explained in a language that the person understands,
can relate to.
Because if you do, just like you're saying, the heart energy field stuff is like, it's real, it's measurable, it's been shown time and time again. And so there's just a matter of bridging that gap between, you say, oh, okay, so here's what we think is going on. Your body is emanating an electromagnetic field, and it's going to be different based on this and this and this. And Chinese medicine thinks that the meridians mean this and this and this. And so this is how it could work. Then somebody's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But if you're like, no, you spin the crystal and the demons fly out of your ears, people are like, all right, whatever. Do you do that? You know what I mean? I don't see how that could work. Yeah. So if you can get into some of the mechanism of it, right. And that's just what I would recommend to anybody listening who's like, this sounds like bullshit. Yeah. Is to just get past the language around it, because maybe we're just not talking about it in a way that makes sense to you, you know? And I mean, so all of this stuff and all of my skepticism about so many things. I mean, we were just having a conversation about this the other night that this guy and I were talking about it, and we sort of agreed that we're open-minded skeptics. Like that's just our general way of being in the world. Is like, yeah, no, I'm totally down, but I'm super
show me
skeptical.
why.
Yeah, show me why, you know, and not like
Great to question
negativity.
things, you know, it always is good to question things
Yeah.
and kind of delve deeper into it to actually try and understand what it is.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
if your brain, like if you have a brain like mine, if I don't understand it, there's no way that I'm gonna believe in it enough for it to even work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like, so there's placebo and there's nocebo, right? And so it's like if you've got a drug that's like, you can show all the mechanisms of how that affects your body, but I just don't believe in it. There's just as highly a likelihood that it won't work for me as it would if it was a sugar pill and I believed it would work, right? So, I mean, your brain's got a huge amount of say in what goes on, you know? So all that being said, I still carry around one of those crystals in my pocket. It's that whole, you know, believe in God, but tie up your camel, you know?
Yeah.
Funny. It's funny. I mean, it's interesting to think about how crystals and energy has been believed in since ancient times.
Right.
Ancient civilizations have been using this forever.
Yeah.
And so, and it's lasted and it's stuck around. So you think about, there has to be some reason why it's been around for so long, and why ancient civilizations were like, this works.
Right.
You know, so, and they all seemed like they were very intelligent.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the same brains as we have, and you know, and in fact, probably. Well, this is my prediction on like how this is all going to play out for humans.
Okay.
You know, so
let's
we
hear
had
it.
all of these ideas in the beginning. You know, when we were multi-theistic, right? Everybody had a god for everything. You know, there was the god of this and the god of that, and you know, and like in the Japanese traditions, the kama, right? So it was like for water, for everything, there were all of these kama or kami or however they say it, that are fundamentally the spirits that represent the different parts of the observable world around us. You know, and so that's basically all humans. Like that just seems like that was the deal. Everybody's trying to identify something. And then we come up with this idea that we're somehow separate from the rest of it. You know what I mean? And it's like, no. Not each one of these things. We're the things that are alive. All of these other things are somewhat inanimate objects around us. So of course they can't have a spirit that comes with it, right?
Right.
And so that, you know, and how, whatever your thoughts are on the origin of religion and organized religion in the way that we see it now, whether it was like from the get-go a scheme to control people, or whether it was just a natural emergent property of people like trying to be a little more like-minded with each other, whatever your thought is on that whole thing, where it has led to for us is this place where there's one spiritual concept that is God, or this religion or faith process, and it has stripped all of the rest of the world from its spirit, like the thing that many, like every indigenous culture, including our own, back before, you know, when it was indigenous, came to this realization that everything had its own energy, its own spirit, right? And so I think that we're in this cycle where we've gone in this like we're separate from everything world, and Newtonian physics and science that's like, no. We used to think that before we knew it wasn't right. And I mean, Newtonian physics is a great example of that. We're like, no, this is how it is. Show me why it's not. And now with, you know, it's changing quickly, right? Like quantum mechanics and quantum theory and string theory and all of these things that are coming around are shifting it back to this other concept of like things being less and less understandable from this sort of singular point of view that we have. And so my thought is that we're going to go all the way through all of this, and we're going to come back to, nope, science says, you know, like the quantum theory says that this rock, this blue rock right here, is this particular form of energy, and we can measure it, and we know that it influences your body in this way, you know, and I think that's where we're going.
100%.
If we don't screw this whole thing up
Yes.
before, and like have to move to Mars and start over.
And that's why I'm saying I'm already here. You guys should hurry up and get here.
Jump on board. Yeah.
I always find it really interesting. You know, it's like people want to instantly shut down crystals and things like that. But even in science, it's only true until it's proven wrong. And we've proven a lot of things wrong that we were like, nope, this is exactly how it is,
Right.
you know? And so I'm not quick to just shut anything down.
Yeah.
Because we don't really know.
We don't
anything.
really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And all we can really do is go anecdotally how we feel, how this
exactly.
makes us, how we use them as tools. And I think that's like really it. It's like we use meditation, we use mindfulness, we use grounding. I mean, it's just one more of these tools that we can layer into our lives that, again, is just another texture, color, feeling, energy. And it's just, gives you one more way to be connected with the intention of your life and what it is that you're trying to step into. And so with that idea, so this is what I really want to know, because I think it's so interesting. I mean, you have couple 100,000 followers on Instagram. I want to know what this process was of going from I like crystals and I'm going to post pictures to like honestly being like this whole thing, this whole kind of genre of experience out there in that world.
Yeah. So Amaris Land, before it was even crystals, was kind of me talking about like my life experiences through autoimmune disease, which I've gotten rid of now, and toxic relationships, just a complete lack of confidence, the darkness that I've experienced in my life, because I have suffered. Like I said, I want to connect with people because everyone suffers, and I want people to know they're not alone. And so that's kind of where it started. I was just being very authentic and vulnerable in my experiences and talking about them. And I probably had about like 2,000 followers before I started introducing crystals, because crystals were important to me in my healing process. And so I was like, you know what, I've loved these all of my life, and now they're actually like bringing such a healing quality to my life that I want to share that with people. And so I started introducing the crystals. I just one day was like, I'm going to open up a shop. I want to be able to send these healing tools around the world. That's my purpose, And so Amaris Land has always had that authenticity and vulnerability, and the things that I talk about, it's like, oh gosh, like how are you opening up about that? But people appreciate it because they're like, wow, you basically spoke my life experience right now, and I thought that I was the only one. There's even people who message me saying like, thank you for what you said, because I wanted to die tonight and I don't want to anymore, because I know that you're here with me, And so it's like, I made a post today. It's the tools and the crystals and everything are complementary to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And that is to be there for people and spread love around the world. So
wow.
Yeah.
Hey, that's all.
That's it. It's super simple. Yeah. But it is though, right? I mean, that's the thing, is it really is that simple. We try to overcomplicate it, mostly because of people with like my brain. You know what I mean? The way that my brain works, like, we're going to make this a lot more complicated to eventually arrive at the same place. But there's a lot of noise that happens.
But this is why I love this conversation, because it's really easy to get in an echo chamber. And we could have sat here, Amaris and I could have sat here and been like, oh yeah, I love this crystal and it makes me so happy. And and it's
smells like unicorn.
Yeah. And marshmallows. We could just, we could go down that space. But what's important to me is to bring everyone along, like bring everyone into the conversation, and just help people to maybe expand their horizons a little bit, and the way that they look at things and how they interact with the world around them. And, maybe the next time they're feeling bad, or maybe the next time something comes up for them, they'll think, oh yeah, that, that conversation about crystals, maybe I should go outside and just like look at the rocks around and,
put my feet on the earth.
Take my shoes off. And, we live in an interesting world, because Adam and I, have started kind of in this health and fitness sphere where people are totally open to, this idea of grounding, like, oh, okay, yeah, going outside, getting my feet in the dirt, like they can just take it and run with it. It totally makes sense to them. But then if you take it one step further and you're like, oh yeah, and hold this crystal while you do it, they're like, whoa, why?
I don't understand.
Why would I do that? That doesn't make sense. I'm like, wait, but you're totally down with the grounding part, but we lost you at the crystal.
And this whole like negative electron transfer thing from the ground to your feet does not actually stand up. So you're just doing it because it feels right,
Societal constructs, they play a huge role in our lives. And so it's like you said, we like to complicate things a lot, and we think so much. And I think it's just the way our society is in the world that we've developed. It's like our phones are going off all the time. We're rushing to our next destination. And really all of this is just like a matter of stripping away the complicated aspect of things and becoming more simple with your life. It's like not everything has to be so stressful, or there's not, you don't have to give so much meaning to everything. It's a matter of just like becoming one with who you are without all of the noise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think that's actually a really good point, because people, I think sometimes, especially with crystals and with, you know, essential oils, they want to complicate. Well, then I have to have like this crystal for this feeling and this one in this corner of my house, and I've got to recharge them on the full moon. And like they can get sort of swept up into making anything complicated,
Right.
where you're like, no, actually, any of these tools, whether it's the essential oils, the crystals, you know, just going outside and standing in the sun, like it can just be that simple.
Right.
Just that's it, you know, pick something up, smell it, pick something up, feel it. That's it.
Yeah. And I think it's like a pretty unique perspective, because, you know, there is a lot of just kind of, even in the crystal world, constructs of like how you're supposed to do things. And I don't think it has to be that way. I do like using Palo Santo to cleanse my crystals, because everything absorbs energy. So if you're using a crystal to stop negative energy from entering your life, it's absorbing it. And so you want to cleanse it.
Yeah.
You want to charge it under the moon, you know, things like that. And I do those things a lot.
Yeah, that's great. And I think like that's the thing, is like you can get as far into this and go as deep as your interest and your proclivity towards it goes. But like, I don't know that people need to get stopped by like the idea of using these tools thinking they're not going to do it right.
Right. Oh no.
Yeah. And I think, so let's talk about the charging under the moon thing. Cause I actually think this is really interesting. What is like the theory or the idea behind that?
You know, it's just a matter of, we all we go by the phases of the moon in anything, you know. Back in the day, they would use the moon like, oh, this is the time where we do our crops, and then we're harvesting and things like that. So it's kind of just a matter of absorbing the energy that we've believed comes from the moon for so long, which it does. I mean, it has such a powerful impact. It influences the tide of the ocean.
Right.
And so it also influences us, because we are made of water so much. And so it's kind of like the moon is such a center piece for everything. And so it's that energy fills up the crystal. The idea. So
no, that's cool. So I think even just the idea of the intention of charging them or cleaning them or whatever, even that just in of itself is like, I'm just putting out the intention of care, and that I trust in these tools, or I believe in these things to make a difference in my life. And it's almost like a little bit of surrender in a way, you know, and not feeling like you're alone. Like you have these friends, these things, these helpful agents in your life, because especially people who feel alone, they often feel alone because they don't have personal relationships that they feel like are fulfilling them. But if you can actually have a relationship with other things around you, you know, plants, pets,
which we can,
the
They're
weather,
just as valuable.
Absolutely. It's like the relationships don't necessarily have to be just with people, you know. And I think some people, I mean, Adam will even say like, some people they would rather have not like less people in their lives. more inanimate objects.
Me and my rocks, we're hanging out.
My rocks are cool.
Well, and also like the full moon, back to that, is kind of like new beginnings, you know. You're going back into a new cycle. And so the crystals are beginning like a new phase, a new chapter before they need to be charged up again, you know. It's just in alignment with that.
I think, I mean, it's like you were saying earlier, everything in this, and everything that exists, for lack of a better term, is energy, right? Which is fundamentally an oscillation. I mean, that is what energy is. It's a wave, and how, you know, what the frequency is one thing. And the fact that is kind of the nature of things, you know what I mean? Like everything is made out of a wave, and there's so many cycles, like the diurnal, the daily cycle, the annual cycles, the monthly, you know, everything in this world is just a series of cycles, you know, over and over. And it just emulates the fundamental nature of matter, you know, which is that it's just a series of cycles, you know, at various frequencies. And I think once you kind of get your head around that as a concept, then all of a sudden it creates a space for why some of these things might be not even plausible is not really the right word, but like that the concepts of what we're talking about, whether it's gemstones or whether it's meditation or whether it's, neural feedback machines, like it's all measuring and tweaking energy, and like what's taking place in how, this whole thing comes together, So I think, it's, again, it comes back to this idea of language, of how we're talking about these various things and how they impact your life. And I think that this idea of collecting the gems, and like when you're talking about taking them outside and charging in the moon and doing all of these things, if you think about that, that's a ritual, and that's something that's so fundamental to the human existence that we don't have a lot of, and I mean, and this is like, it's a big part of the reason why people have a lot of negative habits, right? So the ritual of smoking, the ritual of doing these things. I come home from work, on the way home from work, I go to the bar and I sit down and I have a drink with my buddy and we talk about this. It's a ritual. It's a social ritual that that happens. It's the same thing for me making coffee in the morning. It's not even that much about the coffee. It's about the ritual of doing it, And so I think there's so many beneficial things to having a ritual in your life. If you think about like Zen gardening, it's like, what the hell's the point? You're out there just raking a bunch of rocks around. You're like, yeah, but you're tapping into what's happening. It's a ritual in your life,
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many angles that you can look at these things from and just and find some positive benefit.
Yeah, well, it's like any of those rituals. It's a moment where you can stop thinking about a million things at once and really focus in on something, which is like meditation. It's, a lot of people think meditation, you can't think at all, but it's difficult to do that. It's more so a matter of recognizing the thoughts and letting them go. And so when you are focusing in on something that is meditation, it's like you're focusing on one thing and one thing only, right? So
yeah,
it's cool.
No, that's cool. So, I what I really want the listeners to get out of this too is just that this authenticity story with you too, how like what you found was that you just authentically had this to share, and that authenticity has really been the guiding light for you creating this land, this Amaris land, and this idea and this construct that you want to create your life around. And I think that's like, for us, it's a big goal of the podcast is to really just help people find that, getting in alignment with your authenticity, whatever that looks like, in order to expand out from where you started is such a powerful thing. And I think that's why I was so drawn to your message and, and just like, obviously the Instagram is beautiful and you have just a way of communicating and the authenticity is there. But it's just, I just want people to like, have this sense of, okay. So like anything is possible really. And that's what this really feels like to me. So I'm curious, what your next steps are, where you see this going. And I know recently, I think there was an article in Vice about you, right? How was that? Like,
it was awesome.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. It was actually like my very first big interview. And so we did a phone interview and it was a great experience, and I got a lot of exposure from it, which was really cool too. So it's nice because I want to be able to spread my message around the world. So when I have those opportunities present themselves, it's really helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I just think it goes to show that people can sniff out authenticity.
Right, exactly.
They really can. They can feel it, and it doesn't matter like what form it comes in. We as humans are so hungry for that, and we want to know, we want to see it and participate in all shapes and forms, which is, I think, really what you and this thing you're creating signify to me. So so what's next?
Well, I've been doing a lot of sound healing and whatnot, so I'm wanting to bring people together in person to heal together. So I've done a couple gatherings, so I'm hoping to grow that realm. I've started a YouTube channel with all my sound healings because I'm a singer as well. And so I sing with the quartz crystal singing bowls and whatnot. But I want to, especially with the YouTube channel, I want it to be an outlet where I can just speak authentically on real things where people can come and watch and be like, okay, like this makes more sense. What I'm going through, like it's possible to come out of it and things like that. Like I don't know. My vision is just to be able to help people all around the world. And so that's kind of, And
that's where you're going.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. Just kind of reaching a broader audience of people. And I also really want to create art structures. So like, healing domes with crystals, and they have like all of the senses. So it's like sight, touch, smell, everything. When you go in, you're transported into like another dimension, and maybe have those installed at music festivals and things like that. So that's like a newer development. So yeah.
I love that.
We'll beta test one.
Yeah.
Like if you got one that it would fit in our little house.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah.
I think that's super cool.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me that, well, I don't know. We say it's interesting all the time. Like everything's, all this stuff is interesting. What I'm hearing from you though, that I think is probably really important, is that you're trying to reach people who fundamentally aren't hearing this message from anybody else. You know, and that's something that I think we forget a lot of times. And I mean, we see it in the health and fitness world all the time. Everybody's saying the same damn thing. If you look at it, you know, if you really dig in, but if you can't hear it from us, maybe you can hear it from somebody else, you know? And so there's probably a huge gap for folks who cannot hear what Vanessa's saying. You know what I mean? Like there's probably an entire generation of people.
That's why he talks so
who can't-
loudly.
yeah, you just can't, believe it or not, if you can't hear Vanessa, there might be something else going on. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, there probably aren't very many people in your generation who are doing this. And at the end of the day, the people who hear us, who hear Vanessa and I the most, are people of our generation. We speak the same language, like fundamentally. Like I couldn't give advice, you know what I mean, to my dad's generation very well, you know, and so I think it's incredibly important that you still, that you keep doing that, you know what I mean? That you keep reaching these people who are the kids, you know what I mean? Who can, who you speak to, you know, and who are completely in tune with what you're saying, that you take this message, which is fundamentally old, and push it into what they're hearing. Because I don't think there's a lot of outlets for that. You know, Snapchat's not doing it, you know? And probably, you know what, it's probably more like the 40-year-old white dudes on Snapchat anyway, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's cool when you can talk to them too about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I was thinking earlier, like when you said you wanted to create, you know, something for all the senses, I actually wanted to ask you earlier. So is it possible to live inside a crystal? Like I was like picturing this, like, I really want to live inside of one.
Yeah, no, there's actually this giant amethyst. I think it's in Australia. It's like a cave.
Oh, wow.
And you can go in and meditate in it. And so, yeah, I mean, technically you could live inside of a crystal if you
Yeah.
wanted
Big
to.
enough,
Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah, I want to
There's
get like
big
crystal
ones.
wallpaper.
Yeah.
Just put it-
I know, right? Just have crystals all over the place.
Exactly.
I mean, I kind of do already in my own house. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I bet your house is like chock full of them.
Pretty crystal-y.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that they're just part of your routine? Like, you know, in the morning you have them in your bathroom and it's like you say hello and
yeah, oh yeah,
yeah.
they're everywhere, and I pick them up. I bring them with me. I mean, I brought all these with me today. It's like I always have a crystal on me, and it's mostly, you know, like what am I attracted to today, and what am I feeling, and I grab that crystal, and it's with me all day.
Yeah.
But yeah, every morning I sage everything or use Palo Santo and all my crystals, and I let them go in the sun, you know, and it's cool. It's nice.
awesome because like even when I hear that, I'm like, what a beautiful way to start the day.
Yeah,
like
it's
even
relaxing.
it's just like a beautiful ritual just to get into your day. You know, let the sun shine on your stones, open up the windows.
Yeah.
Like it's just a lovely ritual, and I love that. So, okay, so where can folks find you? And then also, when are you going to build this thing that we can come visit?
You know, so I am collaborating with a couple different artists who have different strengths. So like someone who's able to actually build the structure and design the structure. I'll be doing like the crystals and the interior and all of the senses and whatnot. But I also want to have like 3D projections going on. So it's like projection mapping on the inside. So it's kind of, we're in the very beginning stages, and hopefully, I don't know, we haven't set an exact timeline, but hopefully within a year we can have it fully done and like set up and already at like a festival or at an installation gallery, things like that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. You just need to pick a Burning Man. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, buy Burning Man 2020. It's happening, or 2019
Right,
or whatever.
exactly.
You know?
Let's just
That
say
is
that
a
right
goal.
now.
Yeah, yeah,
That is
2019.
a goal. Definitely, I would
Yeah.
love to have that at Burning
Yeah,
Man.
yeah. Because that's what have you been?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I love it.
So,
I know you guys have too.
that's
So.
Yeah.
That's exactly what people are looking for
Yes.
there. You know what I mean? A unique experience that's like, of course I was in a crystal cave with, some things that smell good and touchy stuff with 3D projected mapping. You're like, weren't you there? Yeah. That's the best part about that whole
Yeah,
thing.
it's so great.
Awesome. So folks can find you on Instagram primarily.
Yes.
That's kind of like your main outlet, right?
Yeah, so Instagram at Amarisland, AMARISLAND. I'm also on Facebook, so same thing, Amarisland. YouTube, youtube.com/c/Amarisland.
Okay.
Everything is Amarisland.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we'll put all that stuff in the show
Cool.
notes, so it's easy to click
Yeah.
on.
Awesome.
Thanks for
Thank you for
sharing.
being here. This has
Thank
been
you for
so
having
fun.
me. It was
yeah.
so great.
Super
You
cool.
guys are awesome. Your energy is awesome too.
Thank
So
you. Thank
Thanks.
you.
We're putting on a good show.
All right, folks, thanks for being with us today. And we'll hopefully have Amaris back in our world doing something soon.
Thank you
and
so
we'll
much.
see you soon. Bye.
bye.
And that's a wrap, folks. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. And if you did, you can still leave us a review, even though we've got 60 some odd. Feel free to
still
leave
room.
feel free to leave us a 5-star review, and be sure to check us out at BeTheWallace.com, see what's going on.
Absolutely. And if you haven't already, you can grab one of our final spaces for B-Fest, where we will also be having some of the things we talked about today in the podcast, like the sound healing and some of that fun stuff. So
Yeah, and
check
there's
it out.
definitely rocks.
And there'll be rocks.
There will be rocks.
and trees.
Yeah, all the things.
All right, guys, we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.